Great first softball question, Glenn. No, it is not a place to keep the chickens. Um, appreciate.
Well, that's the ports of entry, is the coop.
Ron Butler, ladies and gentlemen, for those not graced with your presence today, you can when you play this back. So what we want to talk about today is this continuity of operations, why it's significant in any agency, and specifically what it means for us in traffic or in a DOT. Some of the concepts that we're going to go over today, continuity overall, the concept of a go kit, definitions of different types of events or incidents that could cause a disaster, especially for your work area. We'll be looking at the threats that the state's analyzed, and then go over some more principles about continuity of operations. Look at it from the perspective of a DOT, and then I'm going to challenge you to look at what it is that you do on a day-to-day basis and how that supports what the DOT has to provide to the state as an essential function. So continuity kicks in when you have one of these two factors occur. You're always going to have your mission occur. That always has to be primacy within DOT. We have to keep these roads moving. Continuity happens, or the consideration for continuity happens if you have a loss of personnel or loss of a facility. Okay? And you're thinking to yourself, well, what could those losses be? We'll cover that. We have our mission. As a DOT, we're required by statute to assist in these different modes of transportation. That would be air, rail, maritime. Pipeline is a mode of transportation, and the roads, obviously. But some of those we don't have consideration of in the state. However, the state still looks at us to help with that. That could be coordinating for resources. It could be coordinating for personnel to look after that. So those are going to be some critical requirements, essential functions for the DOT. We see ourselves also as a primary component to lifeline infrastructure. And those are going to be your 5 critical lifelines. Fuel, natural gas, electricity, water and wastewater, and telecom, right? Without those, businesses can't function and people can't function in their community. We're going to see some impacts of that. We're going to go over that. One way to maintain those essential functions, specifically for you as an individual and you as a DOT worker, is to create some kind of a go kit, if you will. You've got to consider your role. How does your role affect those other requirements, right? Do you support those requirements directly or indirectly? If so, your position needs to continue. That's that continuity part of the continuity of operations. So you have essential functions that support one of those modes of transportation or those critical lifeline infrastructures. What do you need then to maintain your job? Do you need office supplies? Do you need your vital records backed up? Do you need a facility? What are those things? So these are going to be rhetorical type questions. If you want, just shout them out. But please.
So you say for a personal kit at your work facility?
That is a technique used in other agencies. If we look at the Division of Emergency Management here in the state, they all have a little backpack on their desk, little vest ready to go, flashlight. Some of the more critical folks have cell phones or sat phones. But we as individual workers, maybe a change of clothes, some toiletry items, cash.
So not only just
Yes, at work. And then, so stuff for you to support your life activities, your life support activities, but also things to support your job. So your laptop, if you need that, or where are you going to go for the records, your vital records, if you need those, if you can't get them on your server, or if you have to go to someplace else. If your facility is compromised, do you have a vehicle? Is your primary work tool a vehicle? Is it a computer? Is it, what is that thing? And also look at alternate facilities. Where will you operate out of in the event of an incident? Also thinking about your essential functions. So again, your additional support, IT, facilities, and just regular life support. If you're the primary person for your building or for your activity, and you know how many people work in your division, what do you think those people are going to need if they're going to be working, maybe stuck at the location for several days? What will they need? Water, food, and a place to relieve those things sanitary. Thank you, Chief. So those are considerations as well. If you aren't the primary person, you push that observation up. So I see here, hopefully we have a cross-section of the entire UDOT force. Maybe not, but that would be something that you would push up, and I would encourage you to push up to your leadership. Hey, we absolutely need this function, perform this function, and we're going to need this many people to do it. Okay, so definitions of disasters. They could be human-caused. They could be natural, but it's going to be impactful to the local, state, and even on a federal scale. Just want to gloss over that. Okay, so some of the threats, if we look at what a minimal threat, and you might not even consider it, mold, right? That may cause the facility to become compromised or unusable, and you'd have to leave it for a certain period of time. At that point, you'll enact your continuity of operations plan. Again, your critical functions, what can you do or what do you need to do, and what can you do outside of that facility? Can you function outside the facility? And then we go all the way to something like an earthquake, something very catastrophic along the Wasatch Front or wherever you're from. If it were a Wasatch, and the likelihood of it affecting only the Wasatch Front is a little bit higher because that's where most of the fault line occurs. So if you represent somebody from outside of Region 2 or Region 1, you're going to know, obviously, that those affected regions are going to be enacting their COOPs, and if you're in Region 3 or 4 in an unaffected area, you may be responding to that to help this, the affected areas. And then the different considerations, how long is this going to be? Definitely a fire or an earthquake which destroys a building, it could require years of not being in the facility you were used to going back to. So things to consider for continuity of operations. We're just going to throw up some examples here. Loma Prieta, very DOT specific event. Here we're seeing the effects of maybe chemical, biological, nuclear radiation, otherwise known as CBRNE, maybe a deliberate attack, or maybe some kind of a pandemic which would require evacuation and decontamination. Kind of weird things to think about on a DOT, but always a possibility. And this is an example of what happens when you don't have a good COOP plan. So this was immediately after Katrina in 2005, and this was a recent picture, the same area. So the people, what they're trying to show is if you can't get your functions back up and running, they tend to just wither and die. The community still hasn't really rebounded since 2005. And something that we would hate to see, but if that's our complex, what would be going through your mind at that point if that became our complex? And that now it affects not just maybe one or two regions, but all of the entire UDOT department.
You're gonna find out an awful lot of stuff that didn't get backed up.
Yeah, so I don't know if everyone knows everyone else in the room, but I direct a lot of my thoughts and my questions towards an IT solution to a lot of stuff. Michelle is in here kind of representing that aspect of our continuity. And I appreciate you coming in today, because a lot of questions get directed towards that or just taken for granted, right? Especially DFCM as well. You can't just think that your stuff's going to be backed up. Unless you've asked for it, it's not going to happen. Unless you've asked for a building, or you know where to go, how many people, it won't happen. So very important things to consider and calculate. The federal government has statutes and mandates to deal with this. Presidential Directive 5 directs that all agencies will have an incident management system, which will incorporate an emergency operation plan, which will also have a continuity of operations plan. Lots of acronyms, so if you don't understand something, please let me know.
What is the NIMS, please?
National Incident Management System.
HSP.
And that's a presidential directive, so Homeland Security Presidential Directive 5. I believe that's a George Bush legacy. So basically what it's saying is, because when they discovered certain lessons learned after Katrina, there was no real executive guideline for their different departments in the executive branch. And that's mainly who deals with law and emergency services in the federal government. And so that was created, that was designed to help establish not a requirement per se, but a framework of how local jurisdictions and the federal government itself deals with an event. So Katrina, there was a lot of lessons learned, and these are the results of that.
Well, one thing that I thought a lot about after 9/11 happened is the fact that there was so much information that was lost, whether hard copy records for hundreds of businesses and thousands and thousands of people. How they reconstruct that is really how well they back things up and duplicate things. It's a tremendous amount of loss.
Absolutely, that was definitely an eye opener for everybody. But I think every day that we go through this, we're not a New York or we're not an LA, and those types of big events really don't happen to us. But we saw in our little list of disasters, it could be something as simple as a pandemic scare. The H1N1 swine flu prevented a lot of us from going to work, or that affected how we went to work. Those types of things are small. They can be small. So whenever you find yourself in that situation or you see that happening, reflect that back on yourself, I think, is what Ron is trying to say, and consider what ramifications it might have if it affected you directly, as opposed to just in the news. So again, our critical roles, because we're a transportation, we're part of the executive branch. We have these essential functions, and those are the things that are going to, that the state's going to be looking at us to help facilitate. Transportation modes and lifeline infrastructure. Those are going to be the primary ones. How does your day-to-day job affect those directly or indirectly? And if it doesn't, are you going to be considered essential staff, or are you going to be considered, I don't want to say non-essential, but non-emergency response staff, and you'll be working on a different project. You might get reassigned. I might start cleaning up bathrooms or something, you know, to help reestablish normal operations at UDOT. Because I'm not an engineer and I'm not a road worker, so it just depends on the need at the time. Okay, so normal operations are dealt with in our emergency operations plan, normal emergency management operations. So something where we have full facility and full personnel dealing with a contingency. So in a continuity, we won't have either enough people or the facilities required to deal with the event or the incident. And that emergency operations plan on the whole deals with that, with those events. The continuity of operations plan itself is going to be an annex or a sub-chapter in that overall emergency operations plan. And it's going to go over those types of things like a catastrophic incident or a national level event. What would be a national level event here in Utah? We look at something like General Conference is a big event. When we heard that the Dalai Lama was coming, that's a big event. When the president comes, or you know, the Mrs. President comes, that's a national level event. We may be host to a convention, a political convention, the Republican National Convention, or, you know, who knows, another Olympics or another large-scale sporting event. Those are the things that might affect that emergency operations plan. So again, looking at our mission essential functions, trying to continue those throughout the event, and then we resume normal operations as quickly as possible. There's another concept, this continuity of government, right? Can government continue as well as regular operations? So there's another acronym, COG. So you see those put together at times, the COOP and COG. So here are requirements for these levels of government. So overall leadership, the executive branch is going to provide that government, a continuation of government, and the reassurance that they're going to be restoring regular services as quickly as possible. We kind of fall under public safety when it comes to emergency event, and their mandate is to maintain that public safety and security throughout the event. Emergency management, another subset of public safety, and the agency, the organization that we work directly with, they're going to be looking at protecting and preserving life, property, and stabilizing the incident. Different agencies, public health, social services, critical infrastructure. This would probably, if these were in order of priority, I would say critical infrastructure should probably be at the top of the list, because that's going to be those are going to be the things that support everything else, all the other activities. So that I want to draw that connection, that this critical infrastructure coupled with transportation, because we support everything, is going to be at the top of everyone's list. So whatever you do in your day-to-day job, is if that's supporting that, chances are you're going to be needing to do that in a compromised situation. Just more lists of what these different activities, if you will, or agencies are doing in their own wheelhouse, if you will. What are they focused on? Agriculture. Agriculture is also that's also, I want to say, it takes care of the business end of things. So they do a lot of weights and measures. They do a lot of validating of items that come across or come through the border. That's very interesting. So they would be the ones that we would probably be working with to either waive or coordinate for transportation through the ports of entry, right? And that's going to be one important thing to consider is if we had an earthquake, and I hate using that big scenario, but it's if you work from that one, you can kind of work on the other ones as well. But if you think about an earthquake, one of the things that we're going to want to do at the very beginning is control the entry points to the state, because what tends to happen in an event is right. They just, for whatever reason, you know, ostensibly it's to help out, maybe sending clothes or supplies that they think that we might need, and that ends up becoming a third disaster in the event. Right, the first disaster being to human life, the second disaster being to facilities or functions, and this third aspect. Now we've got all this other, maybe first responders try and come into the state and they want to help. Oh, we're just here to help. Well, it's not helping because we don't know how to take care of you. We don't know where you're going to stay, and we haven't figured out what we're doing yet, so we don't know how to put you in an operational capacity. So to avoid that or to prevent that, we've recommended to the state that we control the border. I didn't say close, I said control. So we would let things in a very metered and deliberate way. And one of the agencies that deals with that is this Department of Food and Ag, because they do all those statutes. How would I describe those, Ron? Especially for fuel, you know, how much fuel is this carrying? What's the requirement to bring that in? That and just the weights, and you know, is it meeting certain specifications? Because there are, let's say, as an example from what I know, in the past, the military used to have what they called a single baffle or a single walled tanker, right? And DOT, federal DOT, requires them to be double walled. But if you need that fuel quickly, are you going to prevent a single walled vehicle from coming in? That would be up to the Food and Ag and the governor to say we're going to waive that requirement.
Well, another thing that's I heard one of the problems they had in, I think it was Katrina, was the fact that the refineries have fuel allocated for different reasons. And so for them to have, you know, get the power up and all that stuff, they need diesel fuel for trucks. But the tanks of diesel fuel in reserves in the tank farms, by law, wasn't allowed to be used for that purpose. And it took one of the refinery employees, do you remember the story? One of the refinery employees to just say, you know what, I don't care what's going to, I'll take the heat, we need fuel these trucks. And so he had to violate the law to get things going again, which is kind of stupid. They've since changed that law. But those are some of the things that we have to get out of the way and think about. So what if this happens? Can we use this?
Right, because the fuel that I see fuel is going to be besides water, it's going to be one of the primary things to get through and into the state, because we don't have a large refining capacity here. Most of our refinement comes from Wyoming and Idaho, right, across the border. So that's going to be the stuff we want to get in first. And it's going to be on the ports of entry to control that. We want that at the front of the line, if you will, because there's probably going to be a big line trying to get into the state or even pass through it. And we're going to want to recognize those types of things at the front and move them forward and get them to the hospitals or those grocery stores or wherever to maintain that fuel, and the vehicles themselves, all the first responder vehicles and all of our DOT vehicles, to try and get roads and bridges working again. So
We're also communicating to all the other traffic on the road. It's just passing through, because Utah's where, you know, we have the highest amount of trucks per, you know, vehicle count on the road, to get those other vehicles around the state to their destinations with little inconvenience.
Right, so to wrap up this slide, if you will, what is it that you do in your job to get that done? Right, that would be one of the primary objectives for that first maybe week time period. How does your job affect that, either directly or indirectly? And if it doesn't, if it's a third order effect, then maybe that job is something that you suspend and go to a different job to maintain that continuity. Again, some federal mandates, I want to just briefly go over these. Okay, so we see here that we as a state DOT have requirements on a high priority. So our highest priority is coordinating with federal highways to repair our roads. That's going to be one of our primary objectives, our jobs. We also, it's hard to know what's important if they're all important. But another very important priority is going to be what the governor requests, right? And information definitely is going to be one of those things. Where do we get our DOT information from? We have one of the resources here in the room, the Traffic Operations Center. All the different feeds from the 900 some odd cameras we have throughout the state are going to help provide that. Where else do we get road information from? Mr. GIS? The GIS, right? They may have a repository of all of our structures, shake maps. What else would be a critical bit of information for the government to have? Assets, right? Materials, rolling stock, and then we would coordinate with that to find out the condition of those things and get that up to the governor as soon as possible. His representatives, of course, in the emergency management. So again, more information. Our own headquarters is going to be involved in getting the information out to the public. Again, handled in conjunction with the state through a joint information system, but we have those resources at the TOC, and I think every region has them, if I'm not. You've got Twitter feeds and things like that. Oh, there we go. Over or permitting odd vehicles or non-standard type vehicles. Hugely important. Yeah, I don't know. So we have these primary mission essential functions, and state essential functions. You can see that most of these fall into those primary. Additionally, with this information, that's another essential function. Okay, another slide about continuity of operations. In your own, we remedied some of this at the command level, or at the headquarters level. So Carlos, Shane, and Jason, if they're not present, there is actual delegation of authority down to subordinates that can take over the control of the DOT in their absence. They have a statutory authority to do that now. They were granted that by Carlos. So that's an order of succession, and then that delegation of authority. And we look to have that at the regions as well. Something that needs to be considered if the director or his deputy aren't there. Who is going to take responsibility for roles and authorities at the separate regions? And if you reflect back onto your own department, your own activity, do you need that? Is the person who runs your area, Glenn, I want to ask you really quick, does Rob at Traffic Management Division, does he have any statutory authorities at his level?
I'd have to check that.
And what about you, Ron? Does Chad have anything that requires only, or his signature is the only one that can get things through?
In a case of an emergency like that, I think that, I don't think there is anything there because it would be handed down, through Carl, Shane, or.
Michelle, same for Dave? Anything?
We have designees listed. He does not have any like specific statutory signing. So, but in our plan, our recovery plan, it shows who all the people are that would be empowered to step in.
So that would be something to socialize within your activity. Who is the lead if that person isn't there? Who acts in their stead? And if you don't need this formalized statutory handoff, then you would do it in an informal way, and your document to do that is your COOP. Michelle?
Another authority that you might want to follow with is procurement. Now that UDOT has its own procurement authority, that would probably be wise to make sure Sean Hall can pass down that statutory signing to designees as well.
Definitely.
That will be important, is being able to purchase emergency.
One of the things that Glenn and I always bat around is that those emergency purchases. By show of hands, who has a purchase card? Right? Okay, do you know where your purchase card holders are, if you need to? In an emergency, you kind of want to monitor that, because any purchase that is made in relationship to an emergency has to be documented. I did this because of X. I made this purchase because of X. And it could be these high-end or very expensive computer systems, IT systems. We really don't want a lot of people going out buying computers because their computer was broken. So that's very, very important, that procurement process. At the headquarters level, we're going to establish a finance section that is going to deal with all of that. And so that's important to know how you would get back into continuity through that very controlled or regulated procurement process. Right now, it's the standard way of doing it. But in an emergency, are you going to expedite that? How are you going to do that and still maintain that integrity of the IT program? Because you can't just put anything on the system. They'll go crazy if I'm not understating that, Michelle. It could be very catastrophic in and of itself if all of a sudden we have all these new printers and laptops and whatnot, and nothing is authorized or credentialed. So something very important to consider when writing continuity of operations plans. Your alternate facilities, we talk about all your, maybe your communication requirements, life support requirements, and these backup requirements, maps, things that you need to have on hand that you might not be able to get via the IT system because everything's down. Okay, really quick, considerations for communication. Satellite phones is something that we're working on that we may need to get out to the ports of entry. Region directors would probably want that to maybe their more distant sheds, something to consider. Vital records, what do you need to support your emergency or your essential functions? One of the big ones this AutoCAD stuff, where's that held? Those licenses and those systems, are they on your computer? Are they in a cloud? I don't know.
That's with the IT, what I'm working on with that
Mhm.
is making sure that we've got all of the software and tools backed up.
Mhm.
So I'm about done with pulling that together, and we're gonna have to meet with, Shane and Carl's of how they want to, what they're willing to pay for, getting all of those, restored and equipped.
By show of hands, who uses AutoCAD or CAD for a system? What are other proprietary or software needs that you have, Glenn?
Well, one of the things that we've been worried about is GIS stuff. If, my understanding is right now, we do our GIS via licensed server. It's at the complex, we break the link between the complex and the TOC. We may have all our data stored locally, but if we can't get a license, the program won't open, right?
True, yeah.
And that's, CAD would have the same issue. In a previous life, I used to do CAD.
So what would be a solution? So you're saying if you're cut off from the complex in these little islands of work, the region or the traffic management, you'd say you would need your own local license to be able to run the programs? Because everything's virtual, or not virtual, but not cloud either. Server type based, right?
Concurrent use.
Thin client type stuff, maybe.
I mean, with basic functions, you can still perform submitting the data, things like that, but there are ways to, authorize licenses.
Right, and so that, again, something to consider right into, or even just become aware of it. If people aren't aware of it, that speaks part to your own preparedness. And I think overall, that's what we're concerned with today, is preparedness. How do we prepare for the event? And this is the planning part of it. Prepositioning, that's an interesting concept. How much of it can be prepositioned? Does it need to be prepositioned? And this cyber storage, are there off-site locations? I know from practical experience, the department that I used to work for had their continuity actually in St. George. And if people in Salt Lake couldn't get to St. George, then folks from Arizona would actually come up and flip the switch and turn all the systems back on, specifically finance systems, personnel systems, things like that.
So those things are gonna be managed at the state level, of the departments that manage those. But for UDOT, all of our production systems and data are stored, except at the TOC. TOC has their own exemption to store theirs. But the complex and regions is stored at Salt Lake Data Center of the state office building with the backup in Ridgefield.
Richfield.
So we do have a backup facility, and then we also have in our COOP plan, okay, so both those sites are down, is UDOT complex, because we do have a computer room there that we could put servers in, and out of the TOC that's also a backup site, as well as like Region 3 may be a backup site, so that will, we have a list of, 6 to 8 places that we can go to.
How about people? Are the people in those areas familiar with those, that they're a backup site, or do you need to deploy those?
We currently don't have an SLA.
What's
We
SL?
don't have a service level agreement
Ah.
for Ridgefield with DTS to use that site, and that's one of the things that we need to resolve with management, because there's a cost involved.
Cost
So we have to figure out what cost we want to have
to incur.
in our emergency plan to say, okay, we're going to either purchase servers
Yes.
and load them, we're going to pay X to have servers there at the site, so that's.
Comes down to servers. All of this, I think a lot of this is answered with a server. And if the server is, so if you're thinking about your primary work site, And if that's compromised, where is your secondary, your alternate work site, and does it have the right server? And if it doesn't, you've got to put it into a budget. Or is that something that you want to do? I mean, does your region director, does your activity director want to do that?
I think Joaquin, it's not a bad thing to say that there are certain functions that we may just not do for a while. As
True.
long as we're doing that with open eyes and understanding that, hey, that's probably gonna fall off the list for a while until we can.
So what would we say, what kinds of things might we not do or suspend? What kind of activities might not be that essential in UDOT?
Well, like the planning piece, some of the incidental disaster recovery tests, when SR6 blew up, we had emergency procedures to just pull in whatever resources were available
Mm.
and rebuild the road. We didn't have to go through, what funding is it gonna come from?
Okay.
Go out to bid, and find the lowest bid or whatever. It's just, so there are emergency process in place that you just go and do it. Same with what we heard about with the Hilldale flooding. The roads went out, they just contacted people, they
Okay.
showed up with equipment and supplies and rebuilt.
So procurement might be amended or suspended or
So
configured.
emergency processes,
Mhm.
that had to go through the normal process of going out to bid for X number of days and get the bids, evaluate them. It's that kind of the process is, but, there are.
Got
there are
adjusted.
Procurement processes.
Procurement.
that they can use.
What other, like, activities, future project planning?
So right now, I'm spending a lot of time working on IMT analysis
Mhm.
of staffing needs. That's probably gonna go out the window.
Right.
And we're gonna focus on day-to-day traffic operations with TOC. So probably a lot of planning and analysis functions, potentially even some of the performance monitoring stuff gets scaled back to, and we reassign folks. I'm trying to think within the, for instance, we may look at all our ITS infrastructure and say, well, restoring the AVL plow monitoring part of the website's less important than, getting out basic emergency information.
Like Glenn said, there's gonna be things that, in our case, we have investigators that, if we had a catastrophe, we may pull those folks, 'cause, they're not gonna go out and do a compliance review on a customer in the middle of an earthquake, but we can utilize those folks to do anywhere from soup to nuts, and those types of jobs, they're not critical, they're something that's.
They're not supporting those modes of transportation or those infrastructures, and either directly or indirectly. So yeah, perfect examples.
So we're gonna have a certain number of people in a given area that aren't gonna make it to work. because
Yes.
They're dealing with their own issues at home or whatever.
So I'll reiterate something that I saw Carlos say in a video, for the benefit of everybody here. In the case of an event or an incident like an earthquake, your primary goal or your primary objective at that point is to take care of your family. Don't report into work until that's been taken care of, because if you do come in and your family's not taken care of, you're going to be distracted. You're going to be a non-functioning employee. So we want functioning employees. That means take care of what's essential at your home first. And you know what you need to do at your home. And there's lots of resources. There's an earthquake lady coming later today. I'll put a plug in for her, and she'll tell you what to do to get ready.
That's next.
That's next. And then once that's done, then you can come to work, right? And do your job. But always consider that preparation, that preparedness. Michelle?
And in our area, there may be like certain precedents that have to happen before you would get called in. So for example, if we don't have a network,
Mm-hmm.
it's no good for me to bring my developers in to get source code up and running, because there's no way to sync, we have to have servers, we have to have networks. Then we have to have the DBAs install the databases and the tools. Then my developers come in, so that's kind of like in the
Very good.
No sense calling in somebody to do planning work, for the year 2050 if we don't have certain roads up. So
So
that's important.
let's follow that to its conclusion a little bit. Let's play that scenario. So Michelle's saying maybe that function is not essential. Don't call in these network folks. However, we might reassign them as a project specialist for procurement, for emergency procurement, for IT equipment, and put them on that team. They may get cross leveled over to somebody else to work on something quick. So yeah, you're not working on computers, you're gonna work on buying computers or something like that. That might be something, I like that scenario. And that's where we go into your roles. That was perfectly dovetailed into this next slide. Can you or will you telecommute? Is that an option in your activity? And what contact systems do we have? There's a lot of things out there. We haven't introduced it yet. Reverse 911 or a 1-800 number employees can call into to find out their instructions. What am I doing? Without overloading the organization, and they can go out and get information from there. And it's all about preparing us for reconstitution. There we go, some happy employees telecommuting. Okay, so we looked at COOP ensuring the delivery of critical transportation services with minimal interruption. I don't think that's possible. With as minimal interruption as we can. I think that's our goal. And that's what we're mandated to do, not only from the executive branch, but I think from our own constituencies where we live. I mean, we owe it to the public because we are a public, we're a public entity, we're public servants, and we owe them that. Every employee has at some level a responsibility to maintain that in this continuity of operations and a continuity of government. And you look at this, we highlighted a little bit about personal responsibility, your own personal checklist. Again, another plug for Marilyn Hoff will be coming in at 11 o'clock today. I don't know which room, but no, 200 Bravo, thank you. Something to look at. Also, within your own work area at home, and whatever specific project, what kind of a kit do you put together to get the job done? Do you need, is it a pencil and paper type of a job, or is it a computer-based type of a job? What is it that you need actually? Finally, this is very salient to the point. If there are no roads, nothing happens. All that stuff that we talked about, the lifeline infrastructure, the modes of transportation, I like this saying, if there's no roads, there's no codes. No one can do work. And so we become the primary and the most critical of the lifeline infrastructures. Questions, comments, or concerns? I know we kind of batted around some ideas during the course of the discussion, but if anything else that you'd like to bring up, Ron?
Just reiterates the importance of each individual having made preparations at home. So if there's an emergency, they have their 72-hour pills, whatever, those types of things taken care of. Because if our families are taken care of and we're taken care of, and we can serve rather than be served, that's very important.
Yes. So some online resources. I am one of your resources. This is my contact information. Some online resources from FEMA. These are little 1-2 hour classes that you can take with regards to continuity of operations, concepts that I might not have covered, or things that, hearing it from a different perspective, might bring to light other information. These other classes as well. Everything's going to be available at this Emergency Management Institute website. You can just Google it and it'll take you to that website. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is 1 hour. pretty much. Anything else? Your time is now back to you, Glenn, as moderator. I think we need people to sign in, if you haven't,
Actually, I just realized I did not send around
the clipboard, but that's okay. You can sign in for those who left earlier, and we'll just appropriate you as one of our audience members. Okay, thanks, and enjoy the rest of the day.